Welcome back to my channel. My name's Brian Kafke. I'm a data and AI enabler, and this video is going to be talking about how to choose the right job. I'm going to talk about when should you change jobs, what to look for in a new job, and what to look for in an employer, which is just as important as the job itself. Talk about expectations and how to look out for you. Now, I just did another video related to this, which is about picking recruiters to work with. But even more so, and I talk about a similar thing to this, but even more so when you talk about employers, it's really amazing to me how similar a relationship to an employer is in sort of its context and how it works principally in the way a romantic relationship works. It's two people of equals, and both are looking for something, and they're looking for a long-term relationship. And the employer has certain needs and wants, and the employee has certain needs and wants. And it's when there's a union of the two that it works out really well. And there's a lot of things too, because the interviewing process is like dating, right? It's like you're trying to get to know each other. You're trying to figure out each other. It's like the first job posting is kind of like, on Match.com or something. You're trying to figure out who's your profile kind of matches what we want. But you need to really have a lot of things line up, like values, what you like, what the company's like, how they treat people is how you want to be treated, etc. So there's a lot going on here. And in the end, it's not going to work if it doesn't work on both sides. Now, this is strictly an opinion-based thing, but it's based on many years of working in different companies and seeing a lot of different things that it took me until very recently to kind of see the sort of bigger picture and how to identify the right companies early on. One of the things I want to talk about too is this concept where sometimes you're in a bad situation. You really don't like your job. Maybe you're not being treated really well. Maybe you've got long hours or you're just under a lot of stress. And so you feel like you're just under the gun and you really want to make a job change quickly. I've seen people just walk out of a job, nothing else going on, and regret it later because now they have no income coming in and they're really under the strain of just finding anything to pay the bills, right? They've got a mortgage or whatever they have to pay. So that I call going from the frying pan to the fire, and that you sometimes, because of the pressure, will go to a job that's even worse than what you're in. And you may think like nothing could be worse than this. There's always something worse. So you do want to be careful of that. Here's the thing. It's always easier to find a job when you have a job. Not only do you somehow seem more appealing, you don't have to explain to an employer like why you unemployed, etc. if you just walk away from a job. But more importantly, you can sort of take your time, even though it may be unpleasant and stressful in most cases. I'm not going to say if it's really bothering you, your health is failing, it's that type of thing. But in general, if you can, stay in your job and keep searching. This is something I've done a number of times. One time it took me over a year, and I really wanted to leave a job because it just wasn't working, and I was under a lot of stress, and I was working long hours. But I held on, and I looked for just the right job, one that had good job security, would let me learn a lot of things, and would position me where I wanted to go. And though it took a long time to find, in the end, it was worth it. There were opportunities I could have just jumped ship to another job, but I'm sure I would have regretted it because I knew the other opportunities weren't what I really wanted. So that's my first piece of advice. Don't rush it too quickly because you can regret that. So when should you leave a job? The number one reason I've left jobs is I'm not learning and growing. All right, I end up in a place, I think the next bullet point is usually what happens to me. If you're really good at what you do, here's what often happens. You get into a sort of bottleneck or a pigeonhole, we'll say, for your skills. You're maintaining a site, a website, we'll say. You're maintaining, in my case, maybe like an ETL in a data warehouse. And I'm so good at it that my boss won't let me do anything else. Like, I'd like to go to that new project. No, we need you there. And they would rather, and this happens in a lot of companies, they would rather just let me leave the company than let me move into a project that would give me what I really want. That may seem strange, but in my experience, managers are more really looking at their own immediate needs and are okay if you leave the company rather than give you up in a specific spot. And unfortunately, if you're really good at what you do, that's likely to happen. And what can then happen is you end up, your skills atrophy because you're not getting newer and more advanced skills. And you may also get bored. So this is my number one reason when I've left companies. Another one is you're not being treated well. I was in one a number of years ago, and I mentioned it took me a long time to find something else. And it was really a difficult situation. There was a level of sort of verbal abuse. no appreciation for all the work I was doing, and just expecting more and more and more. And that's a really difficult situation to be in. So if you're not being treated with respect and everything, you need to move on. Finally, this happens too. Sometimes you get in a job, you find that new job, and guess what? It's a bait and switch. You get in and they're not going to let you do what you were supposed to be doing. And you have to be really wary of this. Sometimes they'll say, well, yeah, once we get done with XYZ, then we'll be doing that. That usually means it's never going to happen, because they're never done doing the maintenance of XYZ. They're never going to let you get out of this little whatever you're doing. So you have to be careful of that. And when you find that you're supposed to be working on, say, cloud-based big data, but they've got you working on a legacy SQL Server application on-prem, move on, because that means you can't trust the employer. They misled you. So it's a good reason to move on, especially if it's not getting you where you want to go. So these are reasons I've used. There can be many. Work-life balance isn't there, and you need more flexibility, and they're not flexible. They don't care. Maybe the people in the company, I've been in companies, there's a definite, companies are just like people. Some companies are kind of cold and icy, and they're not very pleasant environments to be in, and others are much more warm and friendly. So there's a lot of reasons, and you need, whatever makes sense. If you're not happy in the job, then that's all it takes, or you don't think it's going where you want. Now, when you're not learning and growing, when you're stuck in a bottleneck, this actually relates directly to job security. Your job skills are your job security, and that's happening to be more and more the case than it's ever been. So if you let yourself get stuck in one of those bottlenecks, next thing you know, 20 years from now, you're still stuck doing a legacy SQL Server application, and it'll be on SQL Server 2008 or something. And finally, they get rid of that, and they get rid of you with it. And guess what? You have no skills to go anywhere else, because now that nobody uses it. So you're really putting yourself in a bad position. If you're not being treated well, that can affect your health. I have been in situations where being treated really badly ends up deteriorating my health, especially when there's just too much work being piled on and no appreciation for the amount of work that you're being put under, or the stress you're being put under. And finally, if you're not doing what you agreed to do, that's a trust issue, and that's a good reason to leave. Now, what I don't want to talk about in this, but are obviously really important things to consider, are hygienic factors, which for me, this is Herzberg's motivation hygiene theory, a management theory, where he does this. He classifies this as pay, benefits, and perks like healthcare and days off or vacation or whatever, or maybe discounts for things. These things, while they're nice, they don't really motivate you into the job. They're not going to change anything. Whether you pay me $1,000 a month or $10,000 or $50,000, yes, I'll like it. It'll be great to get the money. But it isn't really going to, in the long term, motivate me. I'm not going to like the work any better if I get paid more money. And that's really sort of the central idea here. So I'm not really looking at this in general, these things. However, I am going to do something a little different. Whenever you go to these, self-help things, achieve your dreams, achieve everything, thinking of Anthony Robbins type stuff, where he goes on about all these things that you can achieve. The one thing they never really talk about is what are your core values? What really matters to you? Because that's what should be driving your decisions. What really matters. So even though I'm not looking at hygienic factors, there are some people who say, look, I just want money. I want to make as much money as I can. I want to be driving a Ferrari. I want a house overlooking, the ocean, and that's what I'm motivated by. So that could be all you want. Now, for the type of jobs I do, that can't be your entire motivation. Now, what's a really high priority for me, money matters, but if that's your only goal, that's all you care about, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Independence and autonomy, that's really high for me, super high. I value that probably more than any other single thing in a job. So that's something I have to factor in. Lifestyle. Lifestyle is something that is especially valuable when I remember we had young kids, and I needed flexibility to be able to go get the kids and bring them to daycare or if they get sick. So a lot of times people value that very highly, or just they want to be able to enjoy life and not be expected to work weekends, nights, and kind of be in high demand all the time. And then there's learning and growth, which is also next to independence. That's my highest priority too. I want to keep growing. I want to keep developing, because as I mentioned, that's job security, and I want to make sure I can always get employed. It's really high on my list. So my advice, first of all, is if your goal is really money, that's what you want, then you're in the wrong job if you're into IT. Not that we don't get good money, But there are jobs which will pay you like you can make millions of dollars if that's what you want to do. For instance, commercial sales typically will do that. Commercial real estate, not so good maybe in the pandemic days, but commercial real estate, I know people who have made millions doing that. In commercial sales, if you were like in the big end of sales, like even at like Microsoft, Google, etc., you sell a lot at high end, people a lot of money, you can make really good money too. It's a lie, actually, or myth that people can't be rich working for other people. You can. And sales is typically the place you do it, but you got to be in commercial sales, big ticket items where a few percentage points will make you rich. So that's something to consider, or be an entrepreneur and start your own business. I mean, Bill Gates, Bezos, obviously it works if you can be successful. Now, if you're really valuing, like I do, independence and autonomy, I like to have the flexibility to do what I want, when I want, and focus on technology. Like I wrote a book on Azure Databricks, as I mentioned. That capability to really do that is very difficult working for an employer, right? They want to get you to do what they need you to do. So consulting works really well for me. Lifestyle is important. I'm not going to tell you where to go with this, but lifestyle, if you're not getting the kind of lifestyle, work-life balance, things you need, that can affect your health. So obviously that's really important. So health becomes a core value. And learning and growth, again, comes back to job security. So these are reasons for different things. You can think of other things that matter to you. A lot of people, I put no social things in. My type of personality, I don't prioritize the social end in work as much, but a lot of people want to work as part of a team and have that camaraderie and maybe have that sense of a shared accomplishment. So those are things you want to factor in as well. I actually tend to like to work independently. Then I'll work with big teams and things, but I actually like being independent on things even like that. So again, it's what you like. Now, an interesting thing I'm throwing in here is my daughter got me into this thing called your MBTI, which is a Myers-Briggs, I think they call it, I don't know what the TI is, but your Myers-Briggs something inventory. And when you fill it out, basically, it identifies your personality and how you like, what your values and priorities are. And if you go to 16personalities.com, now I get nothing for this. They don't even know I'm recommending it. But my daughter did, and I tried it, and it's pretty cool. You can do a free assessment, and it will tell you this is your personality type. So there's 4 classifications. Like there's first is whether you're an introvert, extrovert, which doesn't mean you don't like to be with people. It has to do with some other things. But there's introvert, extrovert, sensing versus intuition, perceiving versus thinking, and something like that. And then there's finally, I think the last one is feeling versus thinking, and then perceiving versus intuition, etc. But take a look at that, because it gives you a sense of what you will prioritize, what's important to you, and how you like to operate and work. So it's really interesting, and also tells you a lot about how you communicate and things. So, and if you're watching this, you can take a guess at my personality type. I don't think it'd be a surprise to many people, but take a look. You can put that in the comments, and I'll comment back on that. So what about job security? This is something that I think people are getting now, but years ago, one of my first jobs, I worked in a large bank called Fleet Bank. Hint, a spoiler alert, they don't exist anymore. And the mergers and acquisitions of banking, they're gone. But the day I started, somebody came over to me and said, you'll have a job in this bank as long as you want. It's been here 200 years. People retire from this bank. Nobody ever leaves. And they were merged out of business within, like 10 years after that. So that doesn't exist anymore. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they are not going to give you permanent job security. You are only as secure, you're only secure as your skills. You work at Microsoft or Amazon, I guarantee you are only as secure as your skills. If they don't need your skills, you won't be there that long. That's how business is. These companies are tech companies. They need people with the right tech skills. And you have to be careful to make sure that while they may be benefiting from what you're doing, it's up to you to make sure that you're doing the things that will keep you getting long-term security, the right things that people need. So if you have skills that are in high demand, you will be employed. Right now, for instance, cloud, big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that stuff, that's in high demand. Guaranteed, if you have good skills there. I have people all the time saying, do you know anyone that's got this, this, this? People are looking, and we're in a pretty weird economy, and yet these are things people are saying you cannot find them. So those are the things you should be getting. Get cloud skills now. All right. So to look for in an employer. Now again, this is a lot like a romantic relationship. You're saying, I'm looking to get married. I want to find the, Mr. or Mrs. Right. And the employer is the other side of this. So you have to look at things carefully. You have to have the same things in, you're looking at agreement just like a intimate relationship. This is a two-way deal of equals. Now, one of the things I find that's a bit sad at times, many times employers have the mistaken idea that they're in the driver's seat, that they can tick off what they want and everybody's going to just run to them and work for them because they pay money. That is not how the world works anymore, especially in hot technical skills. They have to chase after those skills. They need them. So people with, really good cloud skills, etc., in the right areas, they need to chase, but they really should be anyway. This is supposed to be working of equals. Recruiters get that, but I have found a number of employers that you go in and they think that you're just going to be falling over yourself to work for them, and that's actually a red flag. You don't want to work for any employer that doesn't understand that this is a two-way relationship. So here's another thing I've learned. When you're interviewing, this is like your first dates. Again, I like to use this metaphor because I think it's a really good one. When you first meet someone on a date, typically they're in their best behavior. They're going to dress up, look their best, speak nicely, do all the things to make you, want to date them. Employers are on their best behavior when you're initially interviewing. And if you see bad treatment, you see red flags during the interviewing, then you know that actually working for them is going to be really bad. It's going to be much worse. So watch for how they treat you and other people in the company during the interview process. Key things to look for: values and respect. They value people. They have good values. They are honest. They want to do the right things for their customers, their employers, their stakeholders. They respect other people. They respect their employees and treat them with respect. They talk to them with respect, etc. They support the idea of a work-life balance. I actually spoke to somebody I know that interviewed with a company in Boston, and he asked about work-life balance, and they said, we're a financial company that only wants to make money, basically. We don't care about your work-life balance. That's all you should hear, and you get out of there. Don't even talk to them at that point. Integrity. Are they honest? There's a lot of companies that actually have lawsuits going on because of their lack of integrity. There's a lot of problems. So look for that. Is this like a place that's looking to just, they would steal from customers? If they're going to steal from customers or anybody else, you can bet they're not going to treat you very good either, and you don't want to be a part of a dishonest outfit. And there's all different levels of integrity, so be aware. It may not be like they're actually stealing, but they're not really being upfront and honest with you. And again, a key thing, really important, is how do they value and treat employees? If you're going to go work in a place, just having a place where people are nice, they treat you well, they appreciate their employees, that goes further than probably just about anything else in terms of, like, you may not even be getting what you want in other ways from the job, but you're not going to have a bad time working there, right? So that's a key thing to keep in mind. And the other thing that's really big is the team you would actually work with. Like, what's the group of people you will work with? Now, I've gotten job offers, and yet I never really spoke to many of the people who would be part of my team. And I've said, before I accept or don't accept, I want to come in and meet the team. And I've had managers, I've done that a couple of times, and the managers actually like that because it showed enough concern, enough interest. They want to know that you're taking this seriously too. And so I got to meet people, and in one case, I found that the person, it was actually only one person, and they were so negative and so really hostile to me coming in that I realized this is not the right job for me, because this is just going to be difficult. My manager would have been 1,000 miles away. This would have been the only person I had to sort of onboard me, and they did not seem happy or eager to work with me. So it was really good I took that extra step, because I may have jumped into the job and it had been too late. So these are all things you have to look at. Now, I also need to separate two things. There's the employer, and there's your direct manager. I've read this, and I now can say it's true, which is the most important person in the world for your success in your job is your direct supervisor or manager. All right, that is the way it is. If they don't like you, if they've got it in for you, whatever it is, they can make your life miserable, and they really will affect whether you're happy and successful or not. So I've had places that I've had really good managers that I like to work with, that had good technical skills, that could actually guide me and help me move forward. And I've had managers that were the exact opposite. There's not a lot you can do with managers not good, because there is like no facility in any company that I've ever worked for in which the managers above your manager actually have any transparency to what's going on. They don't. They pretend they do, but they don't. What do I mean? Maybe they're being unfair in how they treat people. Some people are getting favored treatment. Some people are, really not doing that much, but getting bonuses and pushed up, while other ones are not. Maybe the work you're doing isn't what you're supposed to be doing. But all of that is typically handed to the manager, and no questions are asked above them. They focus on keeping the people above them happy. Their director or vice president's asking, do you have this, do you have this? And as long as they do what they're supposed to do and they're keeping that person happy, that person never looks deeper. And so in my experience, you're kind of stuck. You're not going to get any satisfaction if your manager isn't going to treat you well, is going to do things. There's not many options. If you try to go above a manager, typically it doesn't go well, because typically the person above them is just going to support them, and you're not going to go well. So I just want to be careful there. I don't want to say that this happens everywhere, but I do want to say that the manager is pretty much what's going to make it or break it, and be careful on that. So make sure when you're interviewing with the manager, it feels good. It's clicking. It seems like they like you. They're going to be nice to you. If there's any sort of weirdness there, or it doesn't feel right, then be careful, because that will pretty much be the beginning and end right there. So what should you do? Ask a lot of questions. The more questions you can ask, employees actually like to get questions. Remember, this is a two-way deal. You have to say, this is what I want. Most of the time, and I've done this myself, you just want to get the job. Give me an offer, because it's great. You feel great. Wow, they made me an offer. But you forget to ask the questions. Do you want the job? You don't want every job. It may sound good. I've had jobs that sounded phenomenal when I first heard about them, only to go through an interview and realize, like, whoa, really, like 80 hours a week, really, just to do this job? Really, even though it sounded really cool technically, you're really running it all with like a hamster on a wheel, if that's how the system works. I know, I'm kind of being facetious, but ask a lot of questions, because as you flesh it out, you may find it's not all it's cracked up to be, and people will generally, you'll be able to find out if this is what you really want. Observe nonverbal and other clues. Like, watch, if you go into a building, it's really much easier than, say, Zoom, but watch, like, are people nice to each other? You see people walking over people's desks, hi, Sue, talking, it's pleasant. They're not under a lot of strain. They're not running around. They're not like stressed out looking. It's amazing, but you can very quickly in a company look around and get a feel for the kind of place it is, especially when you see like the project assistant or secretary chatting with people, and it's not like this stressful situation. It's pretty easy to read. Pay attention to it. Trust your instincts on that. Negotiating is a good idea within reason. First of all, you want to make sure you have something. This is a serious consideration for a job. But one thing I do ahead of time when I've had jobs, I had been going for school for my master's, and when I would always bring up somewhere in there like, hey, I'm going for my master's, do you support tuition reimbursement? That's something you can typically bring up before getting an offer, and definitely worth mentioning, because it's expensive, right, for school and everything. So if there is a benefit to offer that, they're kind of glad to see if it's related to your field, like you're getting an advanced IT degree of some type. So make sure you ask, because sometimes if you don't work it into the negotiation, even if it could be offered as a benefit, you kind of missed out. And I was surprised, but I had that happen in a company. I didn't lose it, but I brought it up, and the manager was like, wow, thank you for mentioning that, because now I have to make sure I work that in. It'll be part of your offer, and then we will pay it. But if it hadn't been in the offer, they might not give me tuition reimbursement. Vacation and things can also typically be negotiated in most companies. So you may not be able to get them to move on money. They won't pay as much, but you can certainly try. But a lot of times, if you've been working, say, 20 years, you shouldn't be going to a job for 2 weeks vacation. You should be able to at least get 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks vacation, that kind of thing. Again, I mentioned meet with your fellow team members. If you get to the point you're going to be on a project team of some type, make sure you meet as many of those people as possible. And if they are ready to give you an offer but you haven't met them, I would suggest not officially accepting until you've talked to those other team members and try to get more information in a field to really be comfortable that this is the right decision. Another thing I've done in the past, which is a good idea, is when you're interviewing, a lot of times you've got things in your life that are going on that can affect the job if you get into the job, and it's easy to forget about those things. For instance, you might have had a vacation you planned to go on, and you've been planning for a year, and it's really important to you, but that vacation would happen a week after you would start your job, or maybe the week that they want you to start, and you haven't really brought it up yet. You don't want to forget to bring it up before you accept the job. In other words, when they make you the offer is a perfect time to say, okay, just so you know, I had this happen and I was in a job, and I said, just so you know, I have agreed to do a presentation at the Spark and AI conference in San Francisco. Now, I was at Microsoft, and my manager was like, okay, great, no problem, we'll help you with that, but it's good you let me know. It was really important because there was a lot of work going on, there were a lot of deadlines, and had I not brought it up, it may not have been so simple 3 months into it when everything's really tight to say, oh, by the way, I need to take a week out and just go over here. So bringing up things early, vacation plans, other commitments, maybe like, for instance, I've taught a class at a local college, letting companies know you do certain things that may have some impact, may not, is a really good way to clear the air, because it's a lot easier to say it to somebody before you work for them. They can't say anything to you that, I'm going to go for a month vacation. They can't say, well, that's terrible. It's perfectly logical and rational. You would do that. You didn't work for them. But once you're working for them, you can't just drop it on them. It's a lot more difficult. So let them know up front. But again, I wouldn't let them know about things like that until they make an offer. Then you can say, oh, by the way, keep looking until it's final. Now, this cannot be overemphasized. Just because you think you're going to get an offer, I don't care if a recruiter or even the company saying, yeah, the offer's going to come through, it's great. You don't even know what the offer is exactly. My advice is it ain't over until it's over. So even while that's going on, keep interviewing, keep talking to places. I would say the only time to stop looking, and this is an integrity thing for you, is once you've accepted, you said, yes, I will take this, I'm going to do it. Don't keep looking. Don't go back to an employer and get a better offer somewhere else and say, yeah, I know I accepted, but I'm leaving to this, or after you've already accepted, try to change the deal. I think that's dishonest, and it's not going to look good on you. So, but as long as you haven't officially accepted anything, keep looking. All right. So let's talk about some myths. First myth, which is something I really thought for a long time myself, was I want to get an offer, right? Because it's great. You go in, you schmooze, you kind of razzle dazzle, and it's a great ego feed if they say, we want to hire you. Even if you don't want the job, you're like, I'm in the driver's seat. But maybe not. And the reason I say this is because you're only seeing what they want you to see. You're seeing whatever the window dressing is they're showing you when you interview, but they know what it's really like there. So they may know more than you do, and something you said, something in you, they've said you're not the right person. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not skilled or you're not good. It may be that you said, I want a work-life balance, and they said, yeah, you're not getting one in this place. And so they have saved you from the pain and anguish of going to a place in which you've got a lot of commitments to your family and maybe small children and stuff, and they know they would be working you to death, so they don't hire you. And I've had jobs like that where it was obvious they wanted somebody who was going to be putting in crazy hours, and so they didn't offer it to me because I was like, yeah, I don't want to work 80 hours a week. All right. Now, kind of following on that, not getting an offer is no reflection on you. Look, not only is it true that they may see things you don't, and so they're actually saving you from a lot of grief, but nobody's good at everything. There are jobs I'm not really good at. I'm not really good at repetitive work. Put me in a corner doing the same thing, I will go insane. I like a lot of variety. I like to do things that are challenging. Honestly, most jobs don't have a huge amount of challenge, so it sounds like, oh, that would be easy. But I actually had a friend who said she went into a job and she's like, yeah, I'm not all that great. I'm not awesome. I'm, in the middle range. They hired her because that's what they needed for the job. So I just think it's funny, and it was great that she was so honest about it. But the point here is, it's not a reflection on you. If somebody said, Brian, we need an aircraft mechanic, I don't know anything about that. You'd be crazy to hire me. But even other jobs in IT, there are probably things that they're looking for that aren't a good fit for you. I've interviewed for like DBA jobs, and honestly, I'm not a DBA. I know enough to do some of those things, but it's not really my core competency. So that's kind of an example. The other myth is don't talk about money or benefits. This, when I was young going through these things, that was kind of a thing, like don't bring it up, at least not until you have an offer. I think it is a good idea not to obviously bring it up front. You don't want his first meeting and they haven't even told you anything about the job. I want this, I want that. That's not going to go well. However, if it's going good and people are talking, a lot of times they'll try to bring it up. Well, they're selling to sell you on the company. We offer tuition reimbursement. We offer daycare. We offer this. So those are good things to take in. And you could ask if they bring it up, like, oh, that's great. They have a place to, leave your car during the day or whatever it is for a benefit, or do you get employee discounts when you go to the movies? I think that's fine. But you don't want to look like you're just trying to get money and benefits without really contributing back to the business. And you really want to obviously appear more interested in the job. If it was a mistake, sometimes people think you've accepted a job, that's it, you're locked in, don't change it. Again, this is a perfect example. It's like a marriage. So imagine you've accepted the job. It's like accepting a marriage proposal, right? But suddenly, after you accepted the job from this person for a marriage proposal, you find out about, they had other kids that you didn't know about. They're already married, or they have a drug addiction problem. When you hit some major issue, fix it right away. I've only had one time in my career where I didn't quite accept it, but it was pretty much almost to that point. And I ended up ending it because it was, in fact, a really huge red flag. It was the case where I met the person who was so hostile, and I realized, like, this is going to be a bad situation. One time I did go into a situation in a contract that was just unbelievably like a disaster in action, and I decided, like, this isn't going to work for me, like, because they wanted kind of crazy hours. And it was just chaos. And I realized, like, I can't contribute or do anything here. So again, I let them know, like, okay, this isn't the right thing for me, but thanks. So you have to do that. So what are red flags? Well, number one, obviously, anytime anyone oversells anything, hyping it up, oh, this about the company. It's good to be positive and show good things about the company, but overselling is a red flag. Number one thing for me, they seem mean. Sometimes you'll see people being rude and mean to other people. That's a deal breaker right there. I mean, if they're mean to other people, coworkers, I've had interviews, and this is a kind of a sub red flag in here, where the person interviewing tried to put me under like a thumb, almost like pressure, kind of put me in an awkward moment by not. It's hard to explain, but just basically put a little social pressure, leave empty space in the conversation of what do you mean, and try to, I think, get you a little bit stressed so they could see how you would act under a stressful situation or question. That to me is a red flag, and I've only had it happen a couple of times, but I realize now that it's a hugely bad sign if that person is somebody you would work for, so it's a good point to walk away. The question you also should ask yourself, look, most positions you're going to walk into are ones that somebody else ran away from. And if that's the case, why did they run away from it? Okay, so why did the other person leave the job? And sometimes, most often, when you get in the job, you're going to find out too late. There's a good reason why this other person left. So it's a good idea to try to figure out why did the other person leave the job and then see what it is. And that will give you some clues about what you're walking into. This is a big one too, huge in many ways. Management doesn't demonstrate knowledge and competence. I went into one company I worked at, and I don't know, within the first week, I asked about a project plan. And my manager said, well, I don't know. And now mind you, there was this huge project going on. They're going to build a system, and yet my manager, who I was responsible for a big part of this for the business intelligence side, didn't have a project plan. So I said, who does? He said, well, talk to the project manager. So I went to a person up there with the title of project manager. I said, do you have a project plan? No. Do you have a spreadsheet with dates, etc.? No. That's a huge problem. Like, so they basically just sort of said, run for the mountain, and everybody runs for the mountain, and they wanted to do everything fast, but there was no plan at all. And I learned as I was in this particular organization that they would willy-nilly just change the top priority. But whenever they did, suddenly it was like life or death to get it done yesterday, but no plan. And there's a thing they say, right? When you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think that kind of spells it out for most places that do that. Unfortunately, project management now has become nothing more than having daily scrum meetings. And so instead of what used to be waterfall projects that actually had project plans at least, have now become no project management at all in a lot of places. So it's a challenge. And so you want to make sure that you try to avoid that, because you don't want to be going into a chaotic situation where things aren't managed well, because if they're not, that's going to put pressure on you to deliver unrealistic expectations. The other part I would say is look for your manager to actually know what you do and understand how to do it. There are two types of management that I've seen in IT: the generalist manager and the technical manager. The manager actually rose through the ranks, knows the technical work, can actually talk to it intelligently, maybe even better than the people who do it because they rose up that way, versus the non-technical. In my experience in technical fields, you always want the technical person. They know what you're doing, they appreciate the complexity, they can advise you when you hit roadblocks, and it's just a much better situation. The non-technical managers typically have unreal expectations because they're not realistic, because they don't understand what you do. And you would think they might appreciate it. I don't know how to, cook a souffle. So if somebody cooked a souffle, I'd be like, wow, that's amazing. But that isn't how management treats you when they don't understand what you do. Instead, they just want to get as much out of you as they can typically, and they don't appreciate what you're doing because they don't understand. It's like, wow, yeah, you just put a window up. It's like, well, no, there's actually a lot behind what it took to do that. So again, competency is really good. I've found that the more technically and professionally competent the team is and the organization tends to be, the better the experience working there, and it's a lot easier work, especially if you yourself hopefully are competent. That helps. Look out for people who, you're in the company. Do people seem stressed out? Do they seem nervous? Are they looking like you're talking to them and they look almost like people are looking over their shoulder, or Big Brother's watching or something? Really big red flag, and I've seen that. One thing, I'll kind of give another story, but one time I went into a company, and when I got there, it was a nighttime interview. I got there and nobody was there, and the security guard at the front desk, and this mind is a pretty good large financial company, asked me what I wanted. I said, I'm here for an interview. They had no record of it. There was nothing registered with the desk. So they said, who? And I told them, and they had to look through their directory to find where this person was. They called her, and she says, they couldn't get a hold of her. She said, we're up on the 4th floor or something, and he didn't even know where. So now the security guard, who was supposed to be at the front desk, leads me up to the 4th floor and through a myriad of rooms, finally puts me at a cubicle, nobody else there, and he leaves me, and then this woman comes out, I'll be with you in a while. Now, mind you, I should have been interviewing 15 minutes earlier because all this wasted time. And finally, after about 40 minutes, she comes out and then interviews me, but no apology for the fact that they weren't prepared. They didn't even have any place to take me in or something. And now, mind you, the recruiter convinced me to go back after this. I knew this was a red flag. This is bad. I got a worse experience. The next time, the person was going to interview me not only was not ready, I actually had to kind of break through security to get into the office so I could be where I was supposed to be. Nobody was prepared. And this person ignored me while he went through voicemails and everything else because he just got in himself. So in other words, this was bad. You're getting treated badly. I just told the recruiter, no, I knew this was a bad sign. Pretty obvious. But pay attention to those things. And kind of getting back to the project management, unfortunately, very few places have any kind of project management methodology. Everybody seems to be just running, and they keep saying least viable product, lowest viable product or whatever, which is an excuse for not managing a project, honestly. And as a result, it's chaos. And that tends to mean that they just kind of squeeze as much out of, I think, people they can. So look for that, because a good project management methodology is invaluable. It makes things run smoother. There should be milestones. There should be end dates. There should be allocated resources and how much time is allocated. And there should be a constant revision going on those project plans if it's done correctly. Agile project management does not mean no project management. And Scrum stand-up calls are not the same. That has nothing to do with it. You need project management. And Agile is actually more difficult to manage because you're doing it in, yes, time boxes, but you still have an overall goal. So again, watch out for that, because that lack of project methodology, project management methodology, is a red flag that the company doesn't really understand what they're doing. What about expectations? First thing realistically is, I've been in many companies, and most people everywhere complain about politics. Oh, this person got the job because they've got a friend, and this person, gets to take their vacation whenever they want because they're friends with the manager and all these things. But I'm going to be honest with you, politics is always going to be there. It's everywhere. We're political people. We're political beings. Excuse me. So you're going to have to live with that. The other thing is, and this is the worst part from my career, but I've gone into jobs and it's like, this job is great. This is the best place I've ever worked. This is awesome. I love what I'm doing. And it changes. It's like one day I'm doing, this is great. This is awesome. 6 months later, the place gets sold to another company. This has really, in the last 20 years, become a serious problem. And I think just about every company I've worked at now for the last 10 years or so, 20 years, has had that. I start, oh, great. I made a great choice. This is a great fit when I went there. Only to see the situation changed. A lot of companies do that. Microsoft goes through a lot of changes all the time, so you have to be very fluid. And so don't expect that whatever you walked into is going to stay the same. You have to realize it will change. And when it changes, maybe it's not a good fit for you anymore. Another thing that is a huge problem employees do, and I recommend you don't do this, don't try to make your employer responsible for you. They are not responsible for training you. They are not responsible for your technical skills. They are not responsible for your happiness. None of these things. You own that. It's up to you. If you let them, if they're not training you and sending you off, they won't pay for things. I remember talking to somebody who, I go and do all these kind of technical talks. I'll pay my own fare. I'll go somewhere and speak. I would have gone to, San Francisco and done my own, paid the way, as long as I can afford to do it. I go to do SQL Saturdays and different technical talks. I take that on myself. I don't ask my employer when I'm working in permanent jobs to pay for that. But I've talked to people like, oh no, I won't do that unless they'll pay for everything. Give me this, give me that. I'm not going to do that. But you're missing the point. You don't do that for your employer. You do it for you. And that's really key. The other thing is, no job is the be-all, end-all. No job is you're done. And a lot of people take that view. Oh, I finally found the perfect job. I'm going to stay here forever and retire, and it's great. If you do that, you're really not being realistic, and you're probably going to end up being laid off when your skills gentrify enough. The search is never over. Whenever I've looked at different jobs, to me it's really a step in my journey, and it may go 2 years, it may go 5 years, it may go whatever. In consulting, it's kind of nice because each contract is its own thing. Each consulting gig is its own unique entity. So it's always just a step in the journey, but it should be. I went to Microsoft for a couple of years, and I learned a ton, and it was awesome, and it was great. But in the long run, I needed to make a step to the next level. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to do more things on my channel. So I made the decision to leave. It was a good place, but it wasn't what I needed anymore. It was when I started. Keep learning and stay marketable. This is a big key. This is the worst thing you can do, is sit back, rest in your laurels, and think you're all set. Gonna kick back, not gonna kill myself, don't need to learn anymore. Phew, that's over. Again, that's death from a career standpoint. Keep learning, stay marketable. Oh, one other thing, which is a really weird thing, and I threw in here just to share with you, but I have been in many companies, and almost all of them say, we have a policy of you can move around, so when you grow out of this job and hit those bottlenecks, whatever, don't worry, you can post for a different job. With the exception of Microsoft, which actually does that. No, they do allow that. You can post within, and they force it from a very high level that is their policy. Every other company I've ever worked for, that was just false, because you have to first tell your manager that you're going to do this kind of apply, and the manager has all kinds of political things they can do to block it. And there's a lot of tricks and things that they do. And so in the end, basically all the fine print turns out to you're not going to be able to make any transfer usually. So I've been in a lot of big companies and small companies, and I found out that idea that you can just move around is really not true. You can't. It doesn't work that way. If you find out different where you are, great. But that's been my experience, especially if you're really good. Your manager will find a way to not let you move, and that's how it works. So wrapping up, when to change jobs? I talked about that. It has a lot to do with your values, what you want, but ultimately, if you're in a dead end, job's not going anywhere, and you need to make a change, that would be my biggest reason for doing it. That's a good reason to make a move, because otherwise you're going to end up losing your job when your skills are irrelevant and not marketable. I talked about what to look for in a job. So you want to get to what are your core values, what really matters to you. Work-life balance, learning, growing, teamwork, and being able to collaborate, doing significant projects, things that you really find interesting and useful, etc. You need to look for those things and make sure you're also looking for the right things in an employer. Are they kind to people? Do they have basic decency? Do they give good benefits and perks? Most importantly, though, is do they treat employees well? And again, in the same way, I think I didn't have that there, but same way, really look at your specific supervisor or manager, whichever the term you want to use, because they're going to make it or break it for you, period. If they're not a good manager, if they're not helpful to you, if they're against you, you're sunk. And you need to make sure that key person, and usually that manager is, surprisingly in my experience, a pretty good reflection of the overall values and culture of the company. So it's a two-way street usually there. We talked about expectations. You're not going to get rid of politics. You're not going to have, a perfect world. There's no utopia. So make sure you get what you really need in these situations. And make sure you look out for you. That's really key. You want to make sure you're getting what you need and not missing something there. So I think those are the big things. In the end of the day, you've got to kind of look at everything. But in my world, the key thing is make sure you're always advancing your career, developing and growing, and becoming yet more and more marketable and desirable, and everything else will fall into place. You don't have to stay in an employer that isn't working. If you've done that, then there'll always be openings and jobs for you. If you're Tom Brady, you're never going to have a problem with somebody wanting you to be a quarterback. That's it. So thank you. Please share, subscribe, like, and put a comment in there. And I think I had the thing in here about personalities and things, but one of mine I had the Myers-Briggs personality test indicator. So if you want to take a look at that, 16personalities.com, that may help you as well. But also take a guess at what I am if you want. I'll take a look in there too. I like to see what people think. And take care. And remember, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together from the Red Green Show. Take care.